They say that first impressions always make the difference, and that applies to zoos as well. The first animal that you see, the first colors that you see, affect your entire experience of the park. Welcome today to San Cabrillo Zoo, where today we are building for flamingos. Yes, those loud, colorful birds that everyone loves. I also have some other ducks in this habitat, but mainly we're going to focus on the flamingos. And while we're at it, we'll also do a few little other decorations here and there, but welcome to San Cabrillo Zoo. Oh my gosh, my friends. Welcome back to another speed build. We have not done one of these in a very, very long time, it feels like. I hope you guys have been enjoying kind of like the level of content that's been put out on the channel as of late. Definitely want to bring a higher echelon to everything that I've been putting out because it has been a blast to edit, to record, all that stuff. Especially the elephant habitat video. That was so fun to put together. And I have to give another huge shout out to Annika for editing that. It would not be as perfect as it is without her help, so go check her channel out if you like that. But today we are building for the beautiful greater flamingo, and I also threw in Narwhaler's white-cheeked pintail duck, as you can see right there, as kind of like a little bit of modded flair. We kind of did the same thing with the flamingos, not with the flamingos, with the cheetahs, with the domestic dog, because they typically have domestic dogs in their habitats at the San Diego Zoo. And I figured, you know what, I want to make this entrance pool feel very welcoming. And again, this is something I talked about in the intro of the video. This is kind of like where we establish how a guest would perceive the zoo. The first habitat, honestly, is always the most important. That's why Roger Williams, as it stands right now, feels a little bit bleak to me whenever I walk through it, because it's kind of boring. There's not really much happening, but definitely want to introduce a lot of color, a lot of variation, and definitely a lot of foliage up front and personal once you enter the zoo. I do a little bit of work on the main street. Outside of the video itself, you can catch some very minor glimpses of it in like our cinematics towards the end. Feel free to skip to that if you're only a cinematics person. I don't judge. But we do a lot of that later down the line. What we're establishing right now is kind of the basis of what this habitat is going to consist of. So you can see I got to work on making our faux rock barrier. At the San Diego Zoo, their flamingo pool is artificial, of course. Lots of ponds in zoo habitats are artificial. It's basically the best way to implement filtration systems, keep the water clean, and keep the animals healthy. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you guys are building in a more realistic vibe. So that's what I'm trying to implement with this pool over here. I do some techniques later down the line. I implement the gravel as the base. I stole that little trick from Remnant. Please go check out Remnant, incredible Planet Zoo creator. He does a really, really awesome series called Balboa Zoo. It's kind of the same thing that I'm doing over here. His is very much more influenced by the beautiful architecture of Southern California, of Balboa Park, and like, you know, the World's Fair operations and stuff like that. So cool to see his take on it. Mine, I'm very much leaning into the zoo aspect. But I was very inspired by that, so I take that into account. And this is another thing I was inspired by, because I was able to visit the San Diego Zoo a few months back. I really want to go back. I've been wanting to go back every single day since I've left. But this is one thing I'm taking into account. Unfortunately, the flamingos were not out when I went. At least in this entrance pool, they had flamingo sculptures here, which I think is a little cute. I would really love it if they actually put like the plastic lawn flamingos out there. That'd be really, really cheeky right there. But what I implement is this very dense mulch island in the middle, which they actually put stuff in there for the flamingos to forage with. It's very much a very clean substrate over there, so they could hide like little treats for the flamingos in there. Very cool stuff. So now that I've established the rest of the pool, here I am putting in the rest of the liner. I'm using these stalactite rocks because, of course I am. They're like one of the best new pieces in the game. So I'm using them as a way to line the pool and divide up the sand, which would be perfectly manicured, as it is in the San Diego Zoo. from the water, which is, things are going to get wet, things are going to get muddy, and flamingos aren't necessarily known for their incredible hygiene. They actually do have quite good hygiene, but, I'm sure that they would track mud everywhere. So we want to take into account how the keepers or the other staff at the zoo would be able to, rotate the sand, the gravel, all that stuff, make sure it's all clean. Now, I'm also building for the white-cheeked pintail in here. Nothing much to tell about this duck. The mod is made by Narwhaler. It is super awesome. Now, they are based on the flamingo, so if they come out of the water, they will float. That is a little bit of an unfortunate thing that happens in Planet Zoo mods, but hopefully, knock on wood, we can get some waterfowl rigs soon. I think that would be a really, really awesome thing to have. Don't you guys agree? I feel like we really need something, at least a pelican or something that walks on land, has tiny stumpy legs, and also goes on water. We need something like that. But there really isn't much to tell about these guys. I believe they're a South American duck species. Really cool colors. I would like to incorporate a lot more ducks in here, but unfortunately the mods aren't updated. So I don't want to really mess with them just yet. Once we get to the other flamingo pools and stuff like that, sort of towards the bottom of the zoo, maybe when we get to our safari park quote unquote section, we could definitely start to incorporate a few more waterfowl. I can start to update some mods along with the rest of my quote unquote team, and then further build off of that, my friends. But for the time being, just 2 animals in here. Nothing crazy. You can see I'm also working on this little fence as well. Very upset by the aquatic fence posts. They wouldn't fully rotate the way I wanted. But I kind of made this quick little device, I guess, using the hinge pieces. I made those kind of screw knobs pop out a little bit more with the end bulbs of those hinges, and I make an entire fence set because why not? I might as well just make all these different lengths that I would need for something like this. And my favorite thing about these, that is my dog. Say hello, everyone. But my favorite thing about these, also I had the biggest issue with choosing a custom path up here. I settle on the East Asia beams, but you'll see that happen in a bit. I like to include this kind of stuff, just me fiddling around with pieces. I think it's always super cool to have, just because you guys get to see my progress and stuff like that, my way of thinking. Half the time in some of these speed builds, you never see the experimental aspect of what some other people do, and I definitely want to include some of that stuff because it really shows I mess around all the time. If I included every single bit where I'm goofing off in Planet Zoo, these builds would be twice the amount of length. In fact, they would probably be 3 times the amount of length because I just sit there looking at the animals half the time. I'm like, okay, what areas of the habitat do you like to sit in, Mr. Flamingo, or some stuff like that? I really don't know. But I like to include tiny little things like that, just showing my way of thinking about your habitats and how you guys can start to experiment a little bit more in your own builds. That's always some of the stuff that I like to include in there, just so that you guys start thinking, kind of Planet Zoo play, like a very dedicated Planet Zoo builder. So you can see I'm continuing these custom railings against all sanity. I really hate doing custom railings for specifically elevated and shifting elevated areas. It is insanely awful to do. It is insanely awful to match up. It is just something that can drive you absolutely crazy. But I do it anyways because it's so worth it. I mean, just look at how well it all comes together. Even right now, it is beautiful. But making these small modular sets in the beginning, it saves so much time in the end, and it really helps to frame, okay, I'm using a whole bunch of different pieces, all these small pieces a lot. So if I make all these small pieces first, then it should be easy to kind of stitch them all together. That's really my way of thinking about when it comes to these big habitats like this, when it comes to these big sections where you're using all these different building ideas, where you're using all these different building styles. You can feed off of each other, and eventually you get these really awesome building sets, which, by the way, thank you guys so much. It's been such a long time since I've actually talked about San Cabrillo. Thank you for getting both San Cabrillo Zoo and the building set to the top of the workshop. That was incredible to see right there. Again, the links are in the description down below. I should be able to have. So go check those out if you haven't already. I've already been seeing so many of you guys make like your own SoCal inspired things. I saw one guy who actually made his based in Italy, which is very cool. Very partial to that. So that is just really, really awesome. I'm super proud of you guys. And it's super exciting whenever I see like people start to use my blueprints, my mods, all that stuff. Please show me more, because it makes me so happy and so proud of this community. But moving off of here, you can see I'm still struggling, and eventually I kind of settle on the last plank in here. I was like, maybe stone would work, but no, it just doesn't look good. Eventually I settle, again, as I said, on the East Asia planks. I think they work very well. I think these are them right here, right? Yeah, I think these are them. And I cut out a lot of this finagling. I have to make them match up with the curbs of the actual pathway itself, which this is something I wanted to take into account with the San Diego Zoo. They have stone curbs on their elevated areas, whether it's stone, concrete, I don't really care. It looks good, it looks clean, and I wanted to implement that. So that's kind of the stuff that I bring to the table here as well. So I'm using the cobblestone from the Europe pathway as a way to get those curbs only, and then I just use that part of it. Literally so trivial, but it looks so good in the end. It looks so clean, it looks so realistic, it has a really nice natural texture on it. I'm very, very happy with how well it came out. I think I want to go back here and change out the color on like every one of like every other plank in here, just to give it a little bit more of something for the eye to look towards, but that's something I'll figure out later. What I also wanted to do in here was bump up the foliage a bit more, because once you enter this area in the real San Diego Zoo, you are instantly transported to the rainforest. There is no question about it. There is foliage everywhere you look, and it covers every single inch of the canopy. We can't really do that in Planet Zoo because our trees don't really have canopies. But what I try and do is build up these sight lines where it looks like you're looking into a rainforest through certain vistas. And this is one that I also wanted to keep in here. I wanted to make sure that you are able to see like the heads of the giraffes from the Flamingo exhibit, because they do live in relatively the same environments in real life. I thought it'd be cool just to be able to get that perspective in there. I thought that was a very cute, cheeky thing to add. Now, what I also add in here is a whole bunch of different kinds of foliage. I try and get a little bit more experimental with my foliage nowadays, so I'm using a whole bunch of different mixes, whether it's like these grassland plants, where I'm using like the dry versions to represent something that, you know, probably gets influenced by a lot of water all the time. I'm using a mix of like the buffalo grasses, both like the lush one and a few more parched ones on the side to make it look like, you know, maybe it dies out as it reaches towards like a more sandy area. And I'm using a whole bunch of different, like, you know, other clutter plants. I love to use those ponytail palms as a way to create like these nice small planted areas. And while I'm not really the biggest fan of the tetrastigma vines, I really can't use them myself. I'm really trying to push myself to use them more. And that's something I really recommend for you out there if you are starting to get a little bit more acquainted with that realistic building of Planet Zoo. It's definitely something that you need to experiment with. It's definitely something that you really need to put yourself out there and say, hey, I've never done something like this before. What if I try it now? And that always does pay off. It might not look good the first time, but the more you play with it, the more you sculpt it, it's gonna look so good. I very much compare it to clay, where if you're working with a cold clay block, it's not gonna mold very easily, but the more you play with it, the more you mold it, the warmer it gets, and the more pliable it gets. You know what I mean? I'm sure you guys do. So, what I'm also adding over here is a little bit of a rock wall, just something to break up the whole look of the habitat and have it feel like it's, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. Because in these zoos, you have so much history built upon each other that it starts to show. So obviously, I kind of went for this area being a little bit more of a recent renovation for the zoo. So I wanted to have some things stick out, whether it's like the beautiful new pathway that we put in, or juxtapose that with that rock wall back there, which would be somewhat of a remnant of the former zoo, or, you know, something from the former habitat. I thought that'd be a really fun thing to implement. I'm sorry, I just hit my microphone right there. So that's also stuff I implement. I also bring up the height of this pathway just a little bit more. That's another thing I recommend when you guys are building in your own zoos. A big thing that people fall into is making flat maps. Once you get into that flat map, there is no way to change that. So one of the best ways to make your zoo feel interesting, feel lived in, and give it a lot more character is to start experimenting with the layers of your zoo. And by doing that, and by increasing or decreasing the elevation, you can create these really awesome vistas and these really uniquely set up habitats that look really cool. What I'm also doing in this area as well is adding a few kind of like dead branches. Not really sure what these are used for, but the real zoo has them in here. I just wanted to throw a few things in here just to help this area stand out a bit more. I also put some enrichment pieces underneath this island so the flamingos would naturally go to it. Besides that, I'm just adding a whole bunch of whatever the hell I feel like. I think one of the things I'm very proud of later is adding these planters in here, which kind of give this a little bit more of a contemporary feel. So it feels like, you know, people are actively growing plants in this quote-unquote little garden. I don't know. I'm also using mulch pieces a lot more, I found. Not mulch, but decals. I really have not felt comfortable using these guys before because they're so finicky to work with. But again, as I said before, experimenting with new pieces is definitely the way to get a lot more acquainted with the game and make your habitat stand out so much more. And I feel like that really helped me in my favor for this habitat because it helped to dress up that area. Huge shout out to Christina, by the way, on the workshop for making these planters in here. This would not be possible without her. I'm changing out the mulch in here because I do like the orange mulch a lot more. So I'm using that in there. But this is essentially a really, really awesome way to help implement a lot more foliage techniques in here. Obviously, we have a lot of natural foliage, but I want to introduce a lot more artificial foliage, quote unquote. It's still real plants, but stuff that really wouldn't be planted in the habitat for one reason or another. Southern California has the advantage of being gorgeous weather all of the time. Even with your May grays and your June gloom, you get some really, really awesome weather. You got some really awesome temperatures, and you can grow pretty much any damn plant that you want over there. However, I still wanted to give these plants a little bit of a temporary feel. Maybe they had them in here originally when bird flu was a thing, and then once they moved the birds in, they just didn't move these plants out. That's something that could happen. I really don't know. But I want to implement a little bit of that just to help it feel a little bit more funky. What I'm also doing over here is just decorating the rest of the habitat. Again, what I always say, the outside of the habitat is always as important as the inside. Making sure that your builds are framed in a really beautiful way is definitely one of the best ways to start to feel a little bit more confident about your own builds and a better way to showcase them. I'm sure that you guys are all in either like the Reddit or the Discord servers or the forums or Twitter or Instagram. Everyone wants to look at a beautifully framed picture, and by framing your builds, you frame your picture. Like you're taking a picture of your build, you might as well build a frame for it. So doing stuff like that is something I always recommend. What I'm also doing over here as well is making this tiny little food court area. I'm not going to go too crazy with this. I just make the food court itself. I don't really make too much of the building. I do show a little bit of that, but it's not done. And I don't want to finish it just yet. I'm working on Main Street on its own. I'm not going to put that in like a speed build video because that really isn't like quote unquote sexy. But it's definitely something I'll be proud to show off soon. Not sure when, but soon. It'll happen. But you can see I'm using the concrete pieces. I am using those cable pieces to indicate where each quote unquote square of this little food plaza ends. And I'm also using the kind of like edges of the, what are those called? Like the sidings, I don't know, as a way to indicate where the plaza ends itself. And I'm also hiding all of that with these lovely little rock cladding pieces. Really awesome way to help make a build feel super more natural. And super more natural. Huh. That, it's not a word. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care. Also adding a whole bunch of foliage in here to make it feel like it's sticking out a little bit more, and again to help frame it. Adding these quote-unquote natural rocks in here. I'm using the temperate and taiga rocks as natural rocks in this build. I know that the grassland rocks and the savanna rocks quote-unquote match it, but it doesn't match it for my vision. It doesn't give that good enough contrast between like all the terrain palettes and what I want a quote-unquote rock to work with. Get experimental with your builds. Again, that's another hint I'll throw out there too. Something doesn't work in the game, it might work for you. I don't build habitats for welfare, I build habitats for me. Try and get a little bit more experimental with your builds, and I'm sure they will fill out just perfectly. Especially right here. I have all this dead area. I thought the best way to cover it up would be a whole bunch of rocks, and damn right it was. If I had dead area anywhere in this habitat, I wanted to make sure it felt a little bit active, give your eyes something to look towards, and create these little base marks, these landmarks, all that stuff, to help build it out just a smidge more and help it feel a little bit more natural. So I start to implement these big rock boulders as a way to indicate, oh, we're entering kind of like a rocky area. Oh, we're kind of like above this cloud forest, this mountain. Because the next area after the flamingos, as you continue down that path, I'm not saying whether that's something we'll build or not in like the next episode, but that's going to be kind of like our primate area. I'm going to have a blast with that one, just so you guys wait. But I'm not really sure what's going to happen next in San Cabrillo Zoo. I know I definitely want to finish up like Main Street, so that's going to lead us to 3 different avenues. That's going to lead us to the primates. That's going to lead us to, what's that? Wildlife Explorers Base Camp. The reptile house and like all the reptile enclosures. That could honestly be its own video. That could honestly be like another like quote unquote elephant video. I'm just going to refer to like my big budget videos as like elephant videos now. Or we could go back to Australia. It really depends what the next DLC is going to be. That's honestly my take. Because if it's South America, damn right we're doing Wildlife Explorers Base Camp. We're going to do like all the monkeys, koati enclosures, all that stuff. If it's Australia or if it's islands, we're going to just do Australia all in one go. Tasmanian devils, wombats, koalas, emus, all that stuff. It's going to be fun, but we'll see. Not doing Africa rocks for a bit. If it's an Africa pack, then I guess we will. I don't know. Interesting stuff, though. I'm excited to see where it leads us. But yeah, that's really it. I'm just doing foliage work for the rest of this build, honestly, just helping to flesh it out a little bit more. I know it looks a little bit empty, but that's kind of the vibe that I wanted. I wanted this to feel very open, spacious, and welcoming, and I feel like that is really my end goal for this. If I could go back in time and make this pool just a little bit smaller, though, I definitely would, but I like the fact that it feels so big, so open, and it definitely feels like a pass-through habitat. Like, yeah, you can just walk by with flamingos, but some people would stop by and just get absolutely mesmerized in this habitat. That's definitely something I want. Also adding a whole bunch of other clutter in here. Not really clutter in a way that helps the habitat feel like, you know, claustrophobic or something, but helps the habitat feel like there's activity in here. That helps it feel like it's lively, helps it feel like it's animated. And I think adding the rocks, the decals, all that stuff in here really helped to make that come true. I also get started on this little safari kitchen thing. I think that's the name of that building. I'm not really sure if I want to go one-to-one with it just yet. You can see me start to build it right here. I'm not really sure if I'm going to continue the vibes or not, but it's definitely something I can focus on later and on my own time. By the time that I'm recording this, I am recording this audio 2 weeks before you guys would even see this video. So I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say, and I'm very interested to see what's going to happen after this video comes out, because the Steam database was updated like a couple days before I recorded this video. And yeah, it looks like we have DLC on the way, so that's going to be very fun to start speculating on. But with that being said, guess what, my friends? After we place down these happy little gutters, we are going to go right into the cinematics. Now, oh my gosh, look at that. Just called it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed everything that's coming out on the channel as of late. I know we're kind of stepping back with all the speed builds, but I feel like now that I put Hope Harbor on the back burner, and I brought San Cabrillo up to the foregrounds. Zoo Sarasota is slowly but surely chugging along. I popped in there the other day. I'm just very happy with the way that things have been going as of late, and I hope you guys are too. Thank you for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of this build in the comments down below. Very excited to see what all our new friends have to say about it. Thank you so much for watching. See you all in the next one. Take care, and bye-bye.